What's up everybody, we're back with another raid guide and today we're taking a look at Ra-Den on Mythic difficulty. I'll be going over most of the mechanics, how to deal with them and our overall tactic for this fight. So for this encounter you want 2 tanks, 3 healers and 15 DPS. At least 5 melee DPS, preferably with immunities like Demon Hunters, Paladins and Rogues. Either way you want around 6 immunities. You can use ranged immunes for this as well and I'll cover the immunity part in a bit. And with that said, let's check out what's new on Mythic. The first big new thing or addition is a new orb called Essence of Nightmare. When eaten by Ra-Den, it triggers Unleashed Nightmare. Every player gets a circle around them and after a few seconds detonates, dealing around 300k damage within a 5-yard radius of that player. It's unavoidable, so just make sure to spread so multiple players' circle doesn't overlap or they'll most likely die. It also grants the Unstable Nightmare mechanic. A 5-stack debuff works like the Vita and Void that it needs to be dealt with 5 times in order for it to go away. First application targets a random player and gives a 15-yard circle around them. After 6 seconds it explodes, dealing around 350k damage, then jumps to the closest player. New player gets a new circle and rinse repeat for a total of 5 times. It also causes instability exposure like the rest of the unstable mechanics. And following this, it will also spawn a new ad. The Night Terror uses Dread Inferno, which is like a trail of fire or flamey tornadoes that follows a random player. If a player gets hit by this, they take around 120k fire damage per tick. Simply run away from other players if you're followed by this. So not only does the extra orb give new mechanics, but it also means you will have to deal with double empowerments on Ra-Den. You kill 1 orb, he eats 2. So Vita and Void and Nightmare, or Nightmare and Vita to deal with each set of orbs. And in phase 2 he also gets a new ability called Corrupted Existence. It targets 3 random players, inflicting around 245k shadow damage and leaves a debuff that lasts for 15 seconds. If the player with Corrupted Existence gets topped off, aka reaches full health, they die, they just instantly die. So healers needs to keep an extra eye on players with this debuff so they don't top them. And players with the debuff needs to make sure they do whatever they can to avoid getting topped. Classes with a lot of self-healing needs to be especially cautious during this. For example, Demon Hunters with Soul Rending, the Leech alone can easily top them during meta. Fury Warriors with Bloodthirst, etc, etc. We also had players with this debuff spam a macro that removes all healings over time, atonements and things like that to make sure to minimize healing taken. Also avoid healing effects on the ground like Healing Rain and Efflow. Other than that, the usual numerical values have gone up quite a bit as well. For example, phase 2 tank mechanic Decaying Strike, or rather the dot Decaying Wound, now deals damage equal to 100% of the player's health every 2 sec, up from 50%. So if tanks and healers mismanage this, it will be a very ouchy moment indeed. And that's about it for the new mechanics. A few words before we go over the fight. The easiest way to approach this fight is yet again a weak aura. I will link this weak aura in the description below as well. So what does it do? Well, due to the added orb on Mythic and the very tight DPS check, you want to manage the unstable mechanics Vita, Void and Nightmare split between range and melee. But also make sure instability exposure doesn't kill you. Meaning if you dealt with an unstable mechanic in the past 30 sec, you can't do it again or you will die. This weak aura just automates this for you. Keep in mind though, it doesn't play the game for you, kinda, and it does require some setup in order to work. So for example, first set of orbs kill Void, Ra-Den eats Nightmare and Vita, range deals with Vita, melee deals with Nightmare. Each group have 5 players plus 2 backups in them, all assigned in weak aura. The backup is for when a ranged gets Nightmare or melee gets Vita. And the weak aura assigns players after the first application, so it pops up to let you know that it's your turn to do a Vita, Void or Nightmare bounce. It just makes everything a lot less hectic. And again, this fight is a tight DPS check, so it involves a lot of pre-assigned movement for both the boss and the raid, but I'll go over this step by step and hopefully it will all make sense. First of all, marks and more marks for the weak aura. You want to mark out where you'll be dealing with some of the unstable mechanics. Going from our marks, we used cross and purple for first and fourth set of orbs. Cross is for the boss, purple is where you run as a melee with unstable Nightmare. 4 marks for unstable Vita, circle and star star is for the first set of orb, so first Vita runs to star, receiver runs to circle, next receiver goes to star, etc, etc. Green and moon is for the third set of orbs. Weakora will still assign circle and star, but use the power of imagination. Green means star, circle means moon. Last mark is square, which is for range to gather on most of the time. Hit me up on Facebook or Discord if you want this next level paint pick of the marks. And with that said, let's go over the fight. First set of orbs you'll be killing is the Void Orb and letting Vita and Nightmare hit Raden. On pull you want to tank Raden on purple mark, pre-spread for Unleashed Nightmare, and as soon as it has detonated, move boss to cross. First unstable Nightmare runs to purple mark, next one in line makes sure to be the closest player to the unstable Nightmare circle without being in it. When it bounces, old player runs back, new Nightmare player stands on purple, and bounce. At the same time, first Vita player runs to star, and first receiver runs to circle. When it bounces, next receiver move to star, etc, etc. We also had only dots plus our 3 Destrolocks on the Void Orb. Everyone else just focused on the boss. Again, tight DPS check. Of course, prio is to get the Void Orb down, but you don't want to do so with too much DPS. It's fine if it dies 1 or 2 seconds before actually reaching Raden. Whichever DPS you do put on the Void Orb, make sure they are positioned so that they can instantly hit the Void Orb as it spawns. And as soon as the ads spawn, the Nightmare and Vita ad, all DPS swaps to the Vita ad Crackling Stalker. Finish it off, then finish off the Nightmare ad. If you get targeted by the Dread Inferno from the Nightmare ad, make sure to kite it away from the rest of the raid. Aim to get both of the ads down before the new set of orbs spawn. Next set of orbs will be Kill Vita, Raden eats Nightmare, and Void. You want to move Raden closer to the star mark when the new orbs are about to spawn. Keep him there until he eats the new Nightmare orb and make sure that everyone spreads before he actually does eat it. Following this, move Raden slowly to the wall behind star mark, roughly where the skull mark is on this picture. All range should be on Vita orb as soon as it spawns, and for this set of unstable mechanics, melee will deal with the unstable void bouncing, and you want to be aiming it into the wall next to Raden to minimize downtime. And range will deal with the unstable Nightmare here. We had unstable Nightmare move to the left side of the raid, and next one to get it just made sure to be the closest player of that. And again, as soon as the ads spawn, all DPS needs to swap to the Void Hunter first here. Ideally, you want it to die before its third cast of Dark Collapse. And here's where the immunities come into play. Void Collapse will always target players in melee, not necessarily melee DPS. And you really want it to target someone with an immunity so they can just move out immune and you don't have to deal with this mechanic at all. If you're, for example, a poor old warrior in this fight, simply move out into range, AFK until it casts Void Collapse, move in, then move out again when it's about to cast. Super fun, super fun. You can have Holy Palas, Mages, and Hunters move in for Void Collapse as well to bait and immune it. And if you don't have enough immunes to go around to cover all the collapses, you will need to go for the old stack up and just heal through it. But it does make it a lot more complicated or healing intense. Anyways, as soon as the Void Hunter is dead, start nuking down the Nightmare ad and start dragging the boss towards the Void Portal. You want to have the boss on top of it for the next set of orbs. And this set is Kill Nightmare, Raden eats Void, and Vita. Yummers! You want to keep Raden on top of the portal so he eats the Void Orb instantly. Melee deals with the unstable Void bouncing, range deals with the Vita, and this is where the green and moon mark comes into play. First Vita goes to green, Weakora will say yellow, receiver goes to moon, Weakora will say circle. So again, use that imagination. Keep Raden on the portal until the Nightmare Orb gets close, then drag him fast to the stairs where you enter the room. Drag him up the stairs if you need a little bit more time on the Nightmare Orb. When the ads spawn, all DPS should focus down the Void Hunter and again use immunities here to deal with the Void Collapses. Again, aim for only 2 Void Collapses. Following this, start nuking down the Vita ad, and when the new set of orbs are about to spawn, slowly drag the boss down through the middle to work your way back to the starting position. Next set of orbs is the same as the first set, so you kill Void, Raden eats Vita, and Nightmare. And if you need, kite Raden a bit so DPS has time to get the Void Orb down down. After that you want to get Raden back to cross, melee bounces Nightmare on purple, range deal with Vida on star and circle, DPS be on Vida ad when it spawns. And here's a judgment call if you will, you want to push Raden to 40% before he eats the 5th set of orbs. So depending on his HP you can opt in to not go full ham on the Vida ad and focus more on Raden, or swap halfway through. Our ad spawned when Raden was around 51% and we lusted around 45% in order to make the push to phase 2 in time. We also swapped off the ads when there was like 10 seconds left before the new set of orbs spawned. Tanks should be ready to kite Raden away from orbs when they do spawn so he doesn't eat any. They will disappear when he transitions. If you can push to 40% without a premature lust, that's better, but lusting a bit earlier is also better than wiping. Anyways, when you hit phase 2, tank Raden around the square mark where range usually stacks. Everyone should be fairly stacked around Raden to make healing easier, and at this point it's just an all-out burn. If you get Corrupted Existence, spam your healing remove macro to remove all hots and atonements and avoid standing and healing effects on the ground. Healers, be mindful of these players so you don't accidentally top them, and don't lay on hands yourself if you have the debuff. You know who you are. For the charged bonds, have the primary target of it run one direction, like out to the right from the raid, and everyone else chain with it to the left. Tanks, have fun, and that's pretty much... Nah, for you tanks out there, we just did the heroic approach for this. One tank, tanks until the king strike hits, then taunt off. And you want to aim to be as low in HP as possible, and I can't stress that enough. I even stood in the AoEs on the ground at some point to get as low as possible. My co-tank turned around to get hit in the back just to get low pre-decaying strike. Externals and heavy cooldowns should be used for this, as well as defensive trinkets and things of that nature after the strike lands. Things like Meta, Vamp Blood and Last Stand should also be used after the strike. If it's procced or is up pre-strike, make sure to remove it, or ouchies will be had. It is not awesome if it ticks for around 900k plus every 2 sec. That's a very big ouchie. Another approach I've seen some guilds go for is one tank takes most of the strikes and the other tank takes Raden in between. So pretty much one tank is kept low by any means, taunt Raden to take the strike, then the other tank taunts him back. This is primarily the case with Demon Hunters and Blood DKs that can heal through the damage from decaying strike. Keep in mind though that Raden goes taunt immune super fast. If he does, you can use Blessing of Protection on the decaying strike tank so he loses aggro to the non-strike tank. Can't say which is the safer approach, but just swapping on each strike seemed simpler to us. On the topic of swapping, we also swapped on one stack during phase 1. The tank damage is pretty high, so going for more than one stack is just bad. Avoid tanking boss and 2 ads at the same time. And that's pretty much it for this fight. Call back to the Bloodlust part though, some people lost on pull, which is definitely viable. If so, the goal is to transition to phase 2 before the 4th set of orbs, instead of the 5th one. If you can't do that, then it's far better to use it for phase 2 instead. In all fairness, this fight is very hectic, but as long as you get used to the weak aura dance and have the DPS for it, it's fairly straightforward. Once you make it to phase 2, the boss just melts. Just make sure everyone understands how the weak aura works, how it assigns people and what marks you need to run to and when, as well as when to move the boss and where, and the rest kind of falls into place fairly fast. With that said, if you have any questions or run into any issues during your progression, hit me up on Facebook or become a Patreon. As a Patreon, you will get access to my Discord where you can find things like weak auras, healing notes, and a ton of awesome people helping each other out during progression. And it's also the fastest way to get a hold of me. And as always, if you like this video, hit that subscribe button, leave me a like, and ring that notification bell. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time.